Moscow has 5 options for a new strike on Ukraine and will try to involve Minsk again. Zelensky held a meeting of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's staff. I will share all the details very soon. It's not just a dead end for Russia. The Ukrainian representative told the UN about Mala Tokmachka and compared it to the siege of Carthage or Rome. Ukraine is a victim and has every right to defend its territorial sovereignty and integrity by all means available to it. And now the new leader of Hungary is giving the Kremlin a definitive rejection? Well, he returned empty-handed. Putin was unable to bring back anything more substantial from China than a declaration about a multipolar world order. Let's talk about all this and more in detail right now. And please don't forget to like this episode. Units of Ukraine's defense forces have struck a number of important targets belonging to the Russian occupiers. Among them is the Lukoil oil refinery in the Nizhny Novgorod region, near the settlement of Kstovo. A major fire broke out there. In numerous videos filmed by local residents, you can see columns of smoke in the sky and open flames at the plant. Lukoil Nizhny Novgorod Nefteorg Syntes in Kstovo has been attacked multiple times already, most recently on May 18th. Let me remind you, this is one of the leading oil refineries in Russia. It is important for supplying the Moscow region. Ukrainian forces also struck concentrations of enemy personnel in the area of Novaya Ukrenka in the Zaporizhzhia region, as well as in Mirny, Snezhnoye and Donetsk. And the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has already announced that he has approved plans for long-range strikes on Russia for the month of June. The Ukrainian leader held a meeting of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's staff. During the meeting, they discussed the potential threat of an invasion from Belarus and the situation near Transnistria. According to Zelensky, Moscow has 5 options for a new strike in an attempt to once again involve Minsk. I quote, "We have thoroughly analyzed the available intelligence data on Russian planning of offensive operations in the Chernihiv-Kyiv direction. For every possible enemy action, we are preparing responses should the Russians actually decide to expand their aggression," Zelensky said, adding that the military contingent of the armed forces of Ukraine will be increased in these directions. In addition, the head of state instructed the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine to prepare additional diplomatic measures against Belarus, which Russia may draw into the war. According to him, the relevant tasks have also been assigned to the intelligence services. It seems that the Kremlin no longer even formally asks for Lukashenko's consent. The threat of invasion from Belarus is growing for Ukraine, while Putin is taking control of the Belarusian army. We will now explain in detail what consequences an attempt by the occupiers to cross the Belarusian-Ukrainian border could have for the mustachioed Ryrik and, above all, for the people of his country.
Large-scale nuclear exercises began across Russia on May 19th. More than 60,000 military personnel are involved, including the strategic missile forces, the Northern and Pacific fleets, and long-range aviation. Belarus is also participating in the nuclear exercises.
In order to enhance the armed forces' readiness to use modern means of destruction, including special munitions, under the leadership of the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces and the First Deputy Minister of Defense of the Republic of Belarus, a training exercise has begun for military units involved in the operational use of nuclear weapons and nuclear support. The exercise is a scheduled training event within the framework of the Union State and is directed against third countries. It does not pose a threat to security in the region. The Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Belarus.
Before the full-scale invasion, exercises were also conducted on the territory of Belarus, and similar statements were made by their Ministry of Defense. Everyone remembers well where the invasion began. The Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs immediately responded to the start of the exercises.
The deployment of Russian tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus and the joint nuclear exercises of the 2 dictatorships are an unprecedented challenge to the architecture of global security. The militarization of Belarus not only undermines trust in international law, but also finally turns it into an accomplice in Russia's nuclear blackmail. The audacity of Moscow and Minsk, who have deliberately crossed all the red lines of the NPT, cannot go unanswered and must be met with a tough, consolidated response and systematic deterrence of both regimes by the Euro-Atlantic community and the entire world. Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Russian tactical nuclear weapons were deployed on the territory of Belarus in mid-2023. And since then, the Russian Federation has increasingly threatened with this weapon and conducted various exercises. This is one of the elements of intimidation not only against Ukraine but against all of Europe.
In the nation of Belarus, well, as much as these recent intelligence reports can actually be trusted, though it must be noted that there are currently no other reliable reports available, a full division of Iskander missile systems equipped with nuclear warheads has been deployed. Additionally, 10 aircraft specifically modified and capable of carrying tactical nuclear gravity bombs are now stationed there. Moscow is continuously pushing the leadership in Minsk to have the Belarusian armed forces directly participate in the ongoing war against Ukraine. That is to say, they are being pressured to launch a direct ground attack against Ukrainian territory.
Shortly before the nuclear exercises, Belarus closed its forests to visitors in 19 border districts of the country. Most of the closed districts are located near the borders with Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania. One of the most important targets for an invasion could be the Rivne nuclear power plant. Putin does not have enough of his own forces, so he is trying to draw the Belarusian army into the war against Ukraine. But Lukashenko understands everything perfectly well.
As I understand it, Lukashenko absolutely does not want this. He understands perfectly well that firstly, in the event
any potential attempt to invade Ukraine would inevitably result in the complete and total destruction of the Belarusian army.
All the roads on the border with Belarus from the Ukrainian side have long been mined and are well covered by gunfire. So for Lukashenko's army, it's a one-way ticket. The exercises and threats are more of a psychological tactic than real actions. The Ukrainian armed forces are currently monitoring all movements of Russian and Belarusian troops, so there is no reason to panic.
But despite the fact that there are currently no large numbers of Russian troops on the territory of Belarus, Russia can use this platform at any moment by transferring additional forces there. There is already a certain amount of blackmail regarding the presence of nuclear weapons on Belarusian territory. Of course, the threat from Belarus is real, and we must be prepared for any developments.
Potentially, the Russian Federation could resort to a provocation in northern Ukraine and draw the Belarusian army into this situation in order to force Ukrainian troops to be redeployed there. But for this, the aggressor needs a grouping and resources which are currently lacking.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte stated that Russia will face devastating consequences if, during joint nuclear capability exercises with Belarus, it decides to use it against Ukraine. He emphasized that NATO is closely monitoring these exercises. Also, during a press conference in Brussels, the NATO Secretary General called the accusations by the aggressor country Russia about Ukrainian drones being launched from Latvia ridiculous. According to Rutte, even in Russia they understand the baselessness of such claims. NATO has the capability to level all military facilities in the Kaliningrad region in the event of a threat from Russia. This was stated by the Lithuanian Foreign Minister, Kęstutis Bandris. We will now discuss the explosive situation in the Baltic region.
Europe is once again warning the Kremlin. Aggression against EU and NATO countries is a very bad idea. And even though Putin continues to consider himself invincible, the alliance can quickly bring him back to reality, and Kaliningrad will be the first to feel it. Neither air defense systems nor the missile complexes with which the city is packed will help.
We must show the Russians that we are capable of breaking through their little fortress that they have built in Kaliningrad. If it becomes necessary, NATO has the full capability to level to the ground the Russian air defense and missile bases located there.
And NATO missiles will have plenty of targets to strike. There are especially many military targets along the Baltic Sea coast. Here, both aviation and military communications are concentrated, as well as repair factories. But the words of Lithuania's foreign minister are not just a warning to Russia, they are also a reminder to the allies. Europe should not underestimate the risks of a potential conflict with Russia.
Europe must demonstrate clearly to the Russian Federation powerful and effective instruments of strategic deterrence. And when Europe only demonstrates attempts to establish bilateral dialogue with Putin, instead of, for example, introducing another comprehensive package of sanctions or providing much-needed military and economic strength to Ukraine, then, of course, this is undoubtedly perceived positively in the Kremlin as a clear and unmistakable manifestation of European vulnerability and weakness, which can definitely be exploited to their advantage.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania also noted that European countries should strengthen their own defense capabilities and take into account that the United States may not come to their aid. Kęstutis Bandris points out that many European plans are based on the assumption that the US will provide Europe with critically important military capabilities such as satellite reconnaissance. But even now, approaches to security should be reconsidered.
After that resonant statement about the Kaliningrad region, he moves on to more pragmatically constructive points and says that if there really is aggression from the Russian Federation, against Europe, the countries of the European Union and NATO, then it will affect everyone. And this could happen in the near future. Such an attack would impact absolutely all members of the European Union, not just those countries that border the Russian Federation. This once again serves as a clear indication that within the Baltic countries, there are deep-seated and growing anxieties regarding whether the United States will truly honor and uphold its collective defense commitments within the NATO alliance now, and furthermore, how other European nations might choose to respond to the Russian Federation's potential acts of aggression.
Despite the fact that Russian aggression is no longer just a hypothetical assumption, Europe is still responding to it very slowly. On May 15th, the Inspector General of the Bundeswehr, Carsten Breuer, stated that Russia could be ready to attack NATO territory as early as 2029. There are also plans for technological superiority, but according to these plans, this should happen before 2035. Europeans continue to think that they have time, even though they say they should already be ready for an attack by Russia. But the EU should have been prepared for aggression yesterday.
Right now, what is unfolding, in my opinion, is preparation for a very geographically broad special operation on the part of Putin and the Russian Federation, respectively. And one of the points will be, let's say, yes, pressure is the Kaliningrad region on Europe. Publicly, Russia needs control over the Baltic Sea, and accordingly over the strait that is currently controlled by Denmark and Sweden. And Russia, without a doubt, needs uncontrolled access through the Suwalki corridor to that very Kaliningrad region.
The Kremlin is increasingly staging provocations over the Baltic Sea. In mid-May, the Poles detected a Russian Il-20 military aircraft, equipped for comprehensive radio, electronic, and photographic reconnaissance in the sky over the Baltic Sea. Before that, in April, the French were forced several times to scramble their Rafale fighters to intercept Russian jets. Some of the Russian aircraft were even armed with missiles. Yes, everything ended without aggression. However, who knows what will happen next time?
For the fifth month in a row, Russia is losing more personnel than it is able to mobilize. Units of unmanned systems forces play an important role in the enemy's sky-high losses. This was stated by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky. Every day, the Russian army loses at least 1,000 servicemen killed and wounded. Since the beginning of 26, the enemy's total losses have already exceeded 141,000 people, of whom more than 83,000 are irrecoverable, he noted. They threatened to reach Berlin and Paris, but on the way they ran into Malotokmachka. For a year now, the occupiers have been unsuccessfully assaulting a small village in the Zaporizhzhia region. Malotokmachka symbolizes not just a tactical deadlock, but also the broader unraveling of the Russian narrative of inevitable victory. This was stated at the UN Security Council meeting by Ukraine's permanent representative to the UN, Andriy Melnik. He ironically compared the Russians' attempts to capture the settlement to the siege of Rome or Carthage. According to Melnik, Russian commentators have repeatedly declared for years that they had almost captured the settlement but have still failed to do so, which demonstrates the gap between Russian propaganda statements and the actual situation. And to confirm this, we suggest simply watching how this triumph of victory mania has unfolded and continues to unfold in Russia, though in reality not at all where they claim. To understand, pay attention to the dates.
Once more, for another time, we will have to completely lay waste to Berlin and march into the heart of that city cursed by God. Once again, we will have to enter Paris. Once again, we will have to liberate Vienna.
In the Zaporizhzhia direction, our troops have achieved certain successes in the area of Malotokmachka. There is fighting on the outskirts of Malotokmachka. There is also fighting in Malotokmachka. Fighting also continues in the area of Malotokmachka. Fighting also continues on the outskirts of Malotokmachka. Fighting also continues for Malotokmachka. Our troops also have made small advances in the southeastern part of Malotokmachka. Fighting also continues for the southern part of Malotokmachka. There is also fighting for the southeastern part of Malotokmachka. The assault on Malotokmachka continues. There is progress in the area of Malotokmachka. There is also fighting in the area of Malotokmachka. There is also progress in the area of Malotokmachka. The enemy acknowledges, yes, our advance in the area of Malotokmachka, and also our troops liberated Malotokmachka near Orikhiv yesterday. Today, the Minister of Defense congratulated the units that took part in this. We are also pressing in the area of Mala Tokmachka. There is progress in the area of Mala Tokmachka in the Orkiv area. There is also fighting going on in the area of Mala Tokmachka. We also continue to press in the area of Mala Tokmachka, in the area of Magdalinivka, and in the area of Mala Tokmachka. In the area of Magdalinivka, in the area of Mala Tokmachka. In the area of Shcherbaki and Mala Tokmachka. In the area of Magdalinivka, in the area of Mala Tokmachka and Shcherbaki.
Well, even the most notorious Z supporters have rebelled because of the increasingly brazen lies of Putin's propagandists and the Russian Ministry of Defense. For example, the largest Z military correspondent channel, Rybar, stated that the generals continue to report non-existent successes at the front. This time it's about the alleged capture of Borova in the Kharkiv region. In mid-May, the Russian military department reported the capture of the settlement of Borova. However, by that time, Ukrainian forces had managed to drive Russian troops out of the village, writes Rybar. But after that, fake videos started to appear, supposedly confirming that Putin's soldiers had taken Borova. But the truth is that most of them were filmed 25 kilometers away from the village, in the settlement of Kolomyachikha, which has long been under the control of Russian forces. Interestingly, this is not the first time Kolomyachikha has served as a backdrop for false reports. Previously, scenes depicting the control over Novoplatonovka after an extremely unsuccessful assault were filmed there, notes Rybar. And just recently, the head of the Borovsk Settlement Military Administration, Alexander Tertishny, confirmed that the information about the occupation is absolutely untrue and that communication with the people living in the settlement is being maintained. Let me quote, "Yes, there are shellings, there are many shellings, but Borovaya is ours, and the village of Sheikovka, which Gerasimov mentioned, is also ours. Therefore, the information does not correspond to reality, just like another fake about Kupiansk," said Tertishny. Ukraine is moving to a new level in the technology war, its own guided aerial bomb, new long-range missiles, and joint projects with Europe. The Ukrainian defense sector is rapidly increasing its capabilities. How is the war forcing Ukraine to become one of the strongest producers of modern weaponry? Let's talk about this further in the report.
Ukraine has created its own guided aerial bomb, and this is no longer just an experiment or a project on paper. According to Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, the bomb has passed all necessary tests and is ready for combat use. The development took 17 months of work by Ukrainian engineers. The project was implemented with the support of the Brave One platform, a government initiative focused on the development of military technologies. The main thing is that this is a completely Ukrainian development. It's not a copy of a Western or Russian weapon, but a system created for the realities of modern warfare.
A regular bomb, well, how far can it go? Even from maximum altitude, it can reach, 10 or 12 kilometers from a high-speed aircraft, right? Here, the range is already significantly greater, several times higher. So that's why such bombs, Russia is constantly using them on the front line. In fact, without strikes from these bombs, those Russian meat assaults, when infantry is simply thrown at Ukrainian fortifications, no matter how many die, that's how many die. So each time, sometimes during the most active assault days, up to 150 of these bombs are dropped.
The new Ukrainian UAV is capable of striking fortifications, command posts, and other targets tens of kilometers deep. In other words, this is yet another tool for precision strikes against the enemy without the need for aircraft to directly enter dangerous zones. The Ministry of Defense has already purchased the first batch of new aerial bombs, which means the development is moving into the practical phase and may soon appear at the front.
But in principle, it allows for the destruction of any field fortifications as well as destroying, dugouts and warehouses. And this will be a serious aid to our ground forces in repelling Russian assaults, or during our counterattacks, we will be able to use a similar tactic, a strike on Russian fortified positions. After that, our drone forces eliminate those who survived with the help of drones, and the assault group captures these positions.
But Ukraine is not stopping there. At the same time, work is underway on new long-range missiles. The European company Destinus, together with the German concern Rheinmetall, is creating the Ruta Block 3 system, a missile with a range of up to 2,000 kilometers. The new missile will have a warhead weighing 250 kilograms and a modern navigation system that will allow it to operate even under GPS signal jamming. This is important in modern warfare, where electronic warfare systems have become one of the key factors. Its tests are to be conducted specifically in Ukraine. According to the plan, the first flight tests will begin in 2027. The project is being developed simultaneously in several countries. The main engineering center of Destinus is already operating in the Netherlands. Germany will be responsible for mass production and certification, while Ukraine will handle testing, combat adaptation, and the production of certain key components.
70% of Russian defense, Russian military enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex will be within striking range. That means we will be able to effectively destroy not only enterprises in the border regions and in Crimea, but also reach as far as just beyond the Urals.
Just a few years ago, the Ukrainian defense sector mainly depended on old Soviet designs. Today, however, the country is creating its own high-tech solutions, from FPV drones and naval unmanned vehicles to aerial bombs and missiles.
There are a lot of components from Western companies. Right now, we practically have no restrictions on access to advanced Western technologies. We can use both radio electronic components and individual modules in our weapon systems.
Ukrainian weapons are starting to attract the attention not only of the military, but also of international partners, since a significant portion of these systems has already been tested in real combat conditions. Thus, Ukraine is gradually becoming one of the key producers of modern weaponry in Europe.
Ukraine is a victim and has every right to defend its territorial sovereignty and integrity by all means available to it, said Hungary's new Prime Minister Péter Magyar. He also said during his visit to Warsaw that he hopes to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the city of Berehov, Zakarpattia region in early June. Magyar sees an opportunity to open a new chapter between Ukraine and Hungary on the issue of national minorities. The Hungarian Prime Minister also expressed hope for a prompt and effective series of negotiations with Kyiv. No president has done more to help Ukraine withstand the Russian invasion than Trump, stated US Vice President J.D. Vance. This was his response to a journalist's question about why the United States decided to reward the Russian dictator Putin by refusing to station about 4,000 of its soldiers in Poland. Vance recalled the American president's favorite argument that Barack Obama gave Ukrainians blankets, while he, Trump, gave Ukrainians javelins. It is precisely these javelins, the US vice president is still convinced, that have allowed Ukraine to maintain its territorial sovereignty to this day. Meanwhile, Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian dictator Putin have signed a declaration on a multipolar world order. However, the anticipated breakthrough on the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline did not happen. The Kremlin only confirmed a general agreement. Prices and the construction schedule, key details, have still not been agreed upon. Both also spoke in favor of ending the war through negotiations, but repeated the Russian formula about the need to eliminate the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis. So will the Chinese leader be able to bring Putin to his senses? We'll talk about this in more detail right now, and please don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ukraine Today.
Putin went to bow before Xi Jinping.
Dear Chinese friends, greetings to you. I am glad to visit Beijing once again.
Every time Trump talks to someone, Putin shows up and sweeps up after him.
This visit looks especially telling, and there are several reasons for that. First of all, it is taking place literally in the immediate aftermath of Donald Trump's trip to China. The Kremlin delayed the official announcement of the date until the very last moment. Only after the American president's visit did it become known Putin is urgently flying to Beijing.
Putin thinks he's grand. Putin thinks he's a genius. And what is perhaps the most deeply insulting part of this is that Putin genuinely believes that he is incredibly clever. That is exactly why, throughout the course of his upcoming interrogation, he will try to get Xi to confess exactly what he had previously agreed upon with America.
Putin and China, China and the United States, that's the trio right now that wants us to talk only about them. This is Yalta 2. At the same time, it's interesting that all sorts of countries like Iran and, I don't know, Turkey and others are emerging who would like to, well, have some weight in this. How they will oppose this regionalization of the world is still an open question, but in principle, this is a conversation that suits these guys. And on the other hand, how much influence they have on the situation and on each other is a very important question.
The visit of the Russian dictator to the Celestial Empire will last 2 days, from May 19th to 20th. The official meeting with Xi Jinping will take place on May 20th at Tiananmen Square, after which there will be negotiations in both narrow and expanded formats, the signing of nearly 40 documents, and joint statements to the press.
Ukraine is prevailing, and without China, Putin is powerless. And this is very important. And the discussion is precisely about the fact that China should begin to rescue Russia on a larger and more serious scale.
Formally, the reason for the visit is a nice one. The 25th anniversary of the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation between the PRC and the Russian Federation. But in reality, Putin did not come to Beijing for anniversary photos at all. After the invasion of Ukraine, the Russian Federation lost Europe as a full-fledged economic partner, came under unprecedented sanctions, and is sinking ever deeper into dependence on China.
Russia's main trump card is simply that they are capable of throwing their entire population into the meat grinder of war to destroy, to attack a neighbor at any moment.
China is interested in further weakening Moscow and making it completely dependent on Beijing. For what purpose? Well, in order to absorb it sooner or later.
Today, it is Beijing that has become the Kremlin's main lifeline, the main market for oil and gas, the supplier of technology, and essentially the financial cushion for the Russian economy.
As everyone understands, this war is extremely beneficial for China. There are no Western competitors to China in Russia. In other words, the Chinese can sell whatever they want in Russia, buy whatever they want in Russia, and at any prices that suit them. That is, Russia has turned into an appendage of China, and the war, even though it is against Ukraine, has greatly contributed to this.
That's why, along with the Russian dictator, almost the entire Russian economic bloc went to China, deputy prime ministers, ministers, and heads of the largest corporations. The Kremlin does not hide the fact that they are placing very serious hopes on this visit.
Russia now needs to completely overhaul, essentially rebuild from scratch all of its oil refineries. Russia needs weapons. Well, thanks to China, they are supplying them. Russia needs logistical corridors that allow it to bypass American sanctions. And at the same time, Iran also needs to remain safe. Because Iran is a very important center of armaments for Comrade Putin.
Across the border, they are once again hoping to push their Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline onto Xi, a project that Moscow has been circling around for several years now. The project is supposed to connect Russian Arctic gas fields with China via Mongolia. But China is in no hurry to sign any final agreements, fully understanding that the weaker Russia becomes, the more favorable terms it can dictate to it. In turn, the Kremlin is also trying to take advantage of the war, only this time in Iran.
The aggressor country Russia hopes that turmoil in the energy markets caused by a war between the US and Israel against Iran will make China more flexible in negotiations.
There is another side to this. According to the Financial Times, during negotiations with Trump, Xi Jinping stated that Putin might ultimately regret invading Ukraine. And this is perhaps one of the harshest signals ever sent by the Chinese leader to the Kremlin. Sources claim that previously, even in private conversations, Xi avoided such direct assessments of both Putin and the war itself.
I believe that nothing will happen regarding Ukraine. China will not exert pressure. America did not make the war in Europe a priority during these negotiations, so we will not see any consequences. None at all, the war will continue.
Whether Putin will achieve anything from Xi will become clear after the negotiations. And whatever the outcome, it is obvious that Beijing is setting the rules of the game. Moscow simply has to play by them